I watched my wife slide an envelope across her parents' Christmas table, and the look she gave me told me exactly what waited inside. The room was noisy with family chatter, her mom setting down dessert plates and her dad refilling glasses, but Ava wore an expression I didn't recognize. It was excitement mixed with something colder. Her sister sat nearby wrangling her kids, her brother debating something pointless with his wife, and the whole place smelled of pine and cinnamon. Ava nudged the envelope toward me with 2 fingers, her red nails tapping lightly, and she spoke loudly enough to pull attention away from the food. "Go ahead. Open it. This is your real Christmas present." The way she hit the word real made everyone glance up. Her mom assumed it would be sentimental. Her dad paused with his glass halfway up, expecting news about a promotion or maybe another baby. I opened the envelope slowly, and the first thing I saw was the letterhead from a DNA testing clinic. My stomach dropped. The results sat there in plain black type. Noah, my 4-year-old son, the kid who had just fallen asleep upstairs after tearing through his gifts. The kid who ran to me every time I came home. 0% probability of paternity. I looked again because it felt impossible, but the numbers were the same. 0%. No room for doubt. Noah wasn't biologically mine. The table fell silent. Her mom stared at me, confused. Her sister froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. Even the kids quieted down like they sensed something was off. Ava leaned back, took a sip of wine, and started talking before anyone else could. She announced to the whole room that she'd stopped loving me 2 years earlier. Just said it as calmly as if she were discussing the weather. Logan, my business partner and friend, had been giving her what she claimed I couldn't. She called it stability. Emotional support. Her mother went pale. Her father set his glass down so hard it clinked against the table. But Ava didn't stop. What she said next made it obvious she had been preparing for this moment for a long time. She'd been waiting for my tech startup to take off. Waiting for me to pour everything I had into building something valuable. Noah wasn't an accident. He was part of her plan. She'd gotten pregnant on purpose, put my name on the birth certificate, and waited. She let me work 80-hour weeks while she built a financial trap around me. And now she was filing for divorce. She would take half of everything, plus child support based on my new income. She already had lawyers. She'd been collecting evidence for months to show the court I had accepted the role of father, which meant biology wouldn't matter. Her mom began to cry. Her dad stared at her like he was seeing a stranger. Her sister grabbed her kids and hurried them to the living room. But Ava just sat there, waiting for me to break down. She expected me to beg or lash out or hand her a reaction she could twist later. Except I didn't feel anger. Just a cold clarity. Because what Ava didn't know was that I had known every detail of her plan for 6 months. While she thought she was arranging her victory, I had been building my own case quietly and carefully. I looked at her, at this woman I had once trusted completely, and felt nothing. I placed the DNA test on the table, smoothing the paper flat like it was any ordinary document, and met her eyes. "Check your email." It was the first time that night her confidence shifted. She pulled out her phone, expecting some panicked message she could show her attorney. Maybe something she could twist into evidence. I watched her face as she opened her inbox. Watched her expression collapse as she scrolled. The divorce petition my lawyer prepared, ready to file the moment she made her announcement. The timeline of her affair, proof attached. The forged paternity paperwork. The recordings I had collected over months. Every conversation where she mentioned her plan. Every text she thought she'd deleted. Every shred of evidence showing this wasn't a marriage falling apart, but a long con. Her hands shook. Her phone nearly slipped from her grip. Her dad leaned over her shoulder. Her mom kept asking what was happening, but Ava couldn't answer. She just stared at the evidence unraveling everything she'd built her scheme on. I stood. Everyone looked at me now, some confused, some finally understanding. I looked down at Ava. "Everything you told them tonight, I already knew. Every step you thought you were ahead, I was 2 steps further. And the moment you declared your intent to divorce in front of witnesses, you gave me exactly what I needed." I walked out of that house, leaving her at the table, surrounded by the family she just humiliated herself in front of, shaking as her entire plan crumbled. I got in my car, drove to the hotel I had booked weeks earlier, and called Marcus, my attorney. He was waiting. Within an hour, he filed everything electronically. The petition, the evidence, the emergency custody motion. By the time Ava woke up the next day, the legal wheels were already turning. She had made one huge mistake. She assumed I'd be too crushed to think clearly. She assumed I wouldn't see what she was doing until it was too late. She assumed I was easy to manipulate. She had no idea how wrong she was. It all began 6 months before that Christmas dinner. And it started when Noah got sick. Nothing serious, just a rough allergic reaction at preschool, bad enough that his pediatrician wanted a full blood panel. I took him because Ava claimed she had a meeting, which should have been my first red flag. Noah handled the appointment bravely, and afterward we got ice cream. 2 days later, the doctor asked me to come in to go over the results. I walked in expecting a medical issue, already preparing myself. Instead, she told me Noah was completely healthy. No serious allergies. Nothing concerning. Then she hesitated. She explained that his blood type was B positive, and according to their records, mine was O positive and Ava's was type A positive. She said gently that two parents with those blood types couldn't produce a B positive child. She wasn't accusing anyone. She just wanted me to be aware of the genetic impossibility. I drove straight to a private lab and paid for a discreet, expedited DNA test. 72 hours. Longest 3 days of my life. When the results came at 2 in the morning, I read them in the bathroom. 0% probability. No doubt. Noah wasn't biologically mine. I sat on that floor trying to figure out my next move. Part of me wanted answers right then. But a smarter part told me to stay quiet and gather information. I lay awake next to Ava the rest of the night thinking about every little thing I had overlooked. How she discouraged genetic testing at birth. How she steered conversations about Noah looking like her relatives. How she pushed me to focus on the business. How she insisted on separate finances and asked me to sign business papers I barely glanced at. Everything suddenly made sense. The next morning, I called the best divorce attorney I knew of, a man named Marcus Hale. I told him everything. He said I needed to move slowly. If Ava was planning something, she'd been building her strategy for months. Since I had acted as Noah's father for 4 years, I had legal paternity regardless of biology. If I confronted her too early, I could lose everything. He told me to document everything. Every expense, every appointment, every interaction. Nothing illegal. Just evidence. For 6 months, I played the clueless husband while building a solid case. And Ava didn't notice a thing. 2 months into the investigation, something unexpected happened. Ava's younger sister, Riley, called me sobbing. We met at a coffee shop, and she said she had accidentally seen messages on Ava's phone. She felt guilty, but she believed I deserved to know the truth. Riley had always been honest, and she showed me screenshots that confirmed everything. Ava and Logan had been involved for years, even before Noah's birth. The messages made it clear Logan was Noah's biological father. But the worst part wasn't the affair. It was the strategy. Ava had been mapping out her plan in text messages like it was a business blueprint. Waiting for the company to hit certain milestones. Calculating the exact support she would get if we divorced. Telling Logan that Noah was her leverage. Mapping out the perfect timing, right after the holidays, the peak valuation for my business. Riley gave me dates. Details. Screenshots. Conversations she overheard. She quietly helped collect information without Ava ever realizing. The hardest part of those months was watching Ava with Noah. She loved him. She took care of him. But her messages revealed she also saw him as a financial guarantee. She even bragged to Logan that having a child with my name on the birth certificate was the smartest thing she'd ever done. That was when I understood this wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about protecting Noah. By December, Marcus and I had everything we needed. But we had to wait for Ava to make her move first. Case law favored swift response to declared intent. So we prepared the petition. The evidence. The custody motion. Everything was ready. And then Christmas dinner arrived, and Ava pushed that envelope across the table. She thought she was springing a trap. She had no idea she was walking into one. That night in the hotel, I gave Marcus the signal. He filed everything immediately. And by morning, the case was officially underway. Ava was about to learn that underestimating someone doesn't just weaken your strategy. It destroys it completely. The temporary custody hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks after New Year's, and when Ava walked into the courtroom, she already looked defeated. Her lawyer was one of those high-priced attorneys who tried to project confidence, but the moment Marcus started laying out our evidence, the man's posture shifted. He knew exactly how bad things were about to get. The judge was Patricia Alvarez, known for having little patience for manipulation involving children. Marcus had deliberately requested her courtroom. She sat behind the bench with her reading glasses low on her nose, scanning through the documents Marcus had submitted, her expression tightening with every page. Ava's attorney tried the expected opening, talking about maternal bonds, established routines, and how disruptive it would be for Noah to live primarily with me. Judge Alvarez lifted her hand and stopped him mid-sentence. She asked whether he had actually reviewed all the evidence presented. He stumbled to a vague answer, and the judge's tone made it clear she wasn't impressed. Then Marcus stood and walked the court through our case methodically. He began with the pediatrician's call that set everything in motion. Then the DNA results. Then the timeline showing the affair had been happening for years. But the evidence that changed the entire atmosphere in the courtroom was the set of messages showing Ava's long-term plan. Messages where she described using Noah to secure long-term support. Messages where she calculated when my business value would peak. Messages where she bragged to Logan that her pregnancy had been strategic. When Marcus displayed them on the courtroom screen, the entire case shifted. Ava shrunk in her seat, her hands twisting in her lap. Her lawyer leaned in and whispered to her, but she wouldn't look at him. The judge read each message slowly, her expression darkening. Then she reached the most damning one. The one from 8 months earlier. The one where Ava told Logan she planned to reveal Noah's paternity at a time that would inflict maximum emotional damage and give her better leverage in divorce negotiations. Judge Alvarez took off her glasses and stared directly at Ava. She asked her to explain the message. Ava's lawyer immediately requested a recess, but the judge denied it. She wanted an answer now. Ava tried to claim she'd been venting. That she didn't mean it. That the messages were just emotional outbursts. But Marcus had already arranged the evidence in sequence to show it wasn't a one-time comment. It was a long pattern. A strategy. There was no way to spin it. Then Riley was called to the stand. She looked nervous but determined. She testified about seeing the messages. She described overhearing Ava tell Logan she was waiting for my business to hit specific targets before filing. She recounted times she saw Logan at the house when Ava claimed she was running errands. She admitted she'd agonized over whether to say anything but knew what Ava was doing wasn't right. At one point, Riley looked at me with tears in her eyes and apologized. The judge asked whether she believed Ava's choices were in Noah's best interest. Riley shook her head and said no. She said Ava had been treating Noah like a financial asset, and it had alarmed her to see it firsthand. Ava's attorney tried to challenge Riley's credibility, suggesting jealousy or bias, but Marcus presented timestamps, screenshots, and corroborating details. The truth was impossible to refute. The judge called a short break, and when she returned, her decision was practically written across her face. She said she'd been on the bench for 2 decades and rarely seen a situation where a parent had orchestrated something so calculated and damaging. She said Ava had shown poor judgment, deception, and a willingness to use a child as leverage. Then she read her ruling. I would receive temporary primary custody. Ava would be limited to supervised visits twice a week at a family center. She was prohibited from discussing Noah's paternity with him. She'd be required to attend counseling. Any violation would risk suspension of her visitation rights. Financially, the judge said the marriage had been built on fraudulent pretenses, so standard division rules didn't apply. Ava would receive only a small settlement. No long-term support. Since I had primary custody, I wouldn't be paying child support. And Logan would be ordered to submit to paternity testing so the court could assign responsibility where it belonged. Ava's entire plan dissolved in a single afternoon. After the ruling, she tried to approach me, mascara smeared, whispering apologies and asking if there was something we could work out. I didn't respond. I walked out of the courthouse without looking back. I drove to Riley's house to pick up Noah. He ran into my arms like he always did. Riley cried quietly and told me she hoped things would get easier, that Noah deserved stability. She told me I was the only real parent he'd ever had. Over the next few months, routine slowly returned. Noah adapted better than I expected. He asked about Ava sometimes, and I answered simply and kindly. I never said anything negative about her to him. My goal wasn't to punish her through Noah. It was to protect him. When the full custody hearing arrived 3 months later, it felt strangely simple. The judge reviewed the past months, noted that Ava had violated the communication restrictions twice during supervised visits, and finalized the arrangement. I received full legal and physical custody. Her visitation remained supervised and limited. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I began dating again. Slowly. Carefully. I met someone who valued honesty, someone who didn't treat relationships like stepping stones. Someone who met Noah and saw a child, not a bargaining chip. We didn't rush anything, but it felt real in a way my marriage never had. About a year after everything ended, I ran into Ava at a grocery store. She looked tired, older, worn down by the consequences of her choices. She asked how Noah was, mentioned she might move out of state. Before we parted, she said she was truly sorry for everything. She said she wished she could undo it all. I believed she meant it. But apologies don't give back stolen years. They don't undo calculated betrayal. They don't erase the damage she was willing to inflict. I told her I hoped she found whatever peace she was searching for, and I meant it. Not out of forgiveness, but because she no longer had any place in my life. She was simply someone from my past. That night, I read Noah his favorite book. He fell asleep halfway through, his hand resting on mine. I watched him breathe and thought about how close I came to losing him. And I realized Ava had been right about only one thing: Noah was the most important part of my life. She just never understood how far I was willing to go to protect him. The months leading up to the full custody hearing were some of the strangest of my life. On the surface, things settled into a new routine. I worked during the day, picked up Noah from preschool, cooked simple dinners, and tried to create some version of normalcy for him.